to the Leadership Factory with Toye Sobande. I am Emmanuel Oyewole, radio host and PR executive. Toye is a consultant, leadership expert, lawyer, administrator, speaker, and a columnist. Toye, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great to be here together. So today we're talking about leadership and workplace conflict, how to handle workplace conflict. All right, Toye, let's talk about leadership. You are an expert in the field of leadership. What exactly is leadership? Because for me, it's one of the most abused words of all the words in the dictionary.
I can imagine.
What exactly is leadership?
Yes. You know, there's been this theory of some are born to be leaders, some are made leaders, are leaders born, are leaders made, and all of that. True. And how you define a thing is based on how you perceive it, isn't it?
Definitely.
Because people have perceived leadership from a perspective of position. So anybody that occupies a position is defined as a leader, not necessarily true. I have my definition of leadership, and my definition of leadership is taking responsibility.
Taking responsibility.
Leadership is taking responsibility. Some people have defined leadership as influence. Some people have said leadership is inspiration. Some people have said leadership is a virtue. But this is the way I see it from my perspective. Anyone who gets to work and takes responsibility of improving the standard of things, the quality of lives for people, is a leader. You don't necessarily have to hold a position or have a title for people to address you with before you become a leader. So whatever steps you take in improving the quality of things or improving the quality of life or helping people gain a sense of direction for their life or helping people solve problems, you automatically become a leader. And what gives you that leadership ability is your ability to get them to move from one position to another. And that movement has to be a progressive movement. Not, people move, but they can move backwards. But here you're moving forward. And that's exactly what leadership is.
All right, great. So another key word here is conflict. What exactly is conflict in this context?
Conflict, particularly in the workplace here, it's simple. Disagreements. Disagreements stemming from differences in opinion, differences in views, differences in perspective, differences in personality. Conflict usually is said to arise where not only that there is a disagreement, but when it comes to the apportionment of resources.
I think you just basically jumped the gun there. I was about asking you, why do conflicts happen in the workplace?
Why do conflicts happen
so
in the
you just
workplace?
basically bailed the cat.
Because let's look at the workplace.
Okay.
Where people work.
Some people call it the workshop. Where people work, they earn their livelihood from there. They are gainfully employed there. So definitely you have to interact with people. So anywhere there are human beings, anywhere there are people, there's bound to be conflict. And it's not because people you don't have to be necessarily to be conflict averse before you experience conflict. You don't have to be the one looking for conflict before conflict comes to you. And conflict itself doesn't necessarily have to be cringeworthy. It's just a normal experience of life. That when you are working in a place, you see people all of the time. So you want to get work done in this pattern. This other person wants to get work at his or her own pace. And you are rather impatient and say, look, we need to get this thing done timelessly. If you have a work ethic, which is a standard, and somebody else has a different approach to work, the person takes his or her time to get things done, or the person, you send someone an email, he's not responding on time, he's ignoring your mail, or the person is dropping the ball, he's not taking responsibility on the job. All of those issues can arise and it can, lead to conflict in a workplace.
All right, amazing. So how do we handle conflict in a workplace?
Wow. Every workplace, particularly a structured environment, should definitely have what we call conflict resolution strategy. Some people think sometimes it's the responsibility of the human resource department, but actually I think it's a leadership responsibility. It shouldn't just be a departmental responsibility, because sometimes some conflicts are not even escalated for everybody in the organization to be aware of. Some conflicts are not even escalated that HR will be aware of it. It may be a conflict between the supervisor and the subordinate, between the manager and the subordinate. So in that instance, people need to gain the emotional intelligence. People need to gain the awareness and the mindfulness to identifying conflict and now devise strategies on how to resolve conflicts. Because when you look at the basic causes of conflict, it stems from usually miscommunication or assumptions. a lack of communication, or not understanding, because there's an encoder, there's a decoder. So if I say something to you and you misunderstand it, it can lead to conflict. If I misinterpret your body language, if I assume certain things about you that are not correct without clarifying from you, without confirming or getting your perspective on the issue, it can lead to conflict. So once we understand what causes the conflict, we can now devise a strategy. And one of the fundamental strategy to conflict resolution is gaining understanding of the other person's perspective. Your own perspective is not the superior perspective. Your own perspective is not the better perspective. You don't have superior views over the other person, because sometimes what the other person sees, you've not seen it until you hear him out. And that's why it's very important to talk things out, to communicate. Don't just jump the gun, don't just react. That's the need for emotional intelligence. So it's a soft skill that at the workplace you need to imbibe, you need to gain knowledge, and it's part of the requirement for the 21st century worker. Emotional intelligence. So the question is, when you are being interviewed for the job, nobody interviews or tests your competence on emotional intelligence, but they assume it's a skill you must have. That's where the problem is. So when people are gainfully employed or gainfully engaged in an organization, part of the training, part of the orientation, the onboarding process is to help the person understand possible issues that can arise that can lead to conflict, and the strategy or the standard requirements of the organization. That means the policy document of the organization vis-a-vis the staff handbook should discuss the conflict resolution mechanism unique to the organization. The process, it must be unique to the workplace. So, but for the individual, for example, if you and I are in the same workplace and we have a personal conflict, I should be mature enough to discuss it with you rather than report it to a third party. I should be mature enough, I should be courageous enough to make excuses for you, not to assume things, and get clarity. If our conflict came up as a result of email exchanges or email banters, I should step out of the email and ask you for a meeting, or pick up a phone and ask you so I can understand your body language, I can understand the perspective you're coming from. That way, if we can eliminate assumptions because of communication, I think 50% of the conflict is resolved.
Now, you mentioned a very key and vital point, which is communication.
Yes.
How important is communication in the whole process of conflict resolution?
We cannot underplay it. And that's where the issue is. Most people don't know how to communicate during conflict because they are so emotional, so that by the time they communicate their feelings, which is either anger, which is an outburst, yelling and shouting and all of that. Now, if you are in the bid to want to resolve a conflict, you can't be shouting. You can't be yelling and say you are communicating. I'm talking here, I'm saying my mind. I hear people say this thing. I say, oh, me, I'm always saying my mind. I don't hide things in my mind. No. You can't just say anything and you're saying your mind. I say, oh, it's the truth. If you don't accept it, And people say, oh, the truth is bitter. The truth doesn't have any bitterness in it. Any truth that you express without tact is cruelty. Any truth that you express without grace is wickedness. There has to be some grace. There has to be some poise to the way and manner you express the truth. You should learn to separate persons from issues. If I have an issue with you, I'm upset about something you've done, I'm not happy about something you've done, I can address the issue without necessarily attacking your person. And when people are communicating, what they do is that they attack the individual and they are surprised at the individual's response back to them. So there's always a cause and effect situation in conflict resolution. So that's where the how you communicate is also very important. That means we also need to adopt that communication skills, which is also a soft skill that can be adopted. Just like we said, emotional intelligence is a soft skill. So that means in the workplace, part of the training for employees or for people in the department, in a unit, in an organization, is communication skills. Not just in writing, not just in speaking, but communication in the sense that we should know how to say things, when to say it, pass across your thoughts in a very civil, professional manner. And that's a very critical dimension.
All right, Toye, so aside all the causes you've mentioned earlier on, are there other causes of conflict in the workplace?
We can't exhaust everything on this show, but one critical ones that people actually face on a daily basis at work is the workplace culture. What is the culture? They say, there's this popular saying that culture will eat strategy for lunch.
I like that.
Culture will eat vision for lunch.
Yeah.
So no matter how powerful the strategy of the organization is,
is
no matter how powerful the vision is, if the culture is wrong, if the culture is toxic, because in many organizations we have a toxic work culture, and it is usually the responsibility of those in leadership. Because the people in the leadership of those organizations, they mirror the behavior that the employees, the workers, and the junior staff observe, and they follow suit. They mirror the behavior of the people. So when you see, and when people talk about culture, they think it's this culture of our language or culture of our, culture is the behavior, the prevailing mental model that exists in the organization. For example, one of the signs of toxic culture in an organization is when there is this unhealthy competition. Unhealthy competition. People are competing to stab themselves at the backstab themselves with words, and win favors here and there. It can be very discouraging, and the consequent effect is that it dampens the productivity capacity of the workforce. People are working, just if they have an option, they will bolt out. In fact, they will be looking out of the window to just get out of the environment. It's so toxic that it's depressing for some people to handle. They wake up in the morning, they don't feel like going to work. They're just tired, they're burnt out. So that element is so important that the leadership of the organization must not be hypocritical. They must not be speaking and be saying the right things and be doing the wrong thing. And we see a lot of people come up on TV, come up on radio, come up on, that. The workplace culture they put into place is so toxic that they create divide and rule in their organization. They set their people against each other. They don't practice what they preach. They're so hypocritical. And you know what? People see through your hypocrisy. Definitely. And so when the leadership is wrong in that perspective, you create a very unhealthy workplace culture. So the number 2 dimension to it is that's poor working condition. It can create bitterness and resentment when the tools that people need to work with are not available. The resources people need to work with are not. So it's frustrating for them. So people will just be fighting. So for example, let's say there's only one printer in the entire organization of 50 employees, and the printer is positioned in somebody's office, and the person locks the office because the last time he kept the office open, somebody took his phone or took his wristwatch or took it and walked and went for lunch. And he found out that something, and people are now coming, they will be angry. He said, no, I locked it because the last time you people came here, you stole my phone, you stole my wristwatch. I said, what do you mean? Anything can result. But when the working condition is structured in a way to help people do their job, do it well, do it efficiently, and do it effectively, it will reduce the level of the conflict. So there are many causes that we cannot exhaust on this show.
Definitely not.
So we just encourage people to leave their comments or questions.
So if you're there listening, please, if you have questions, please just go on the comment section and drop your questions. We will definitely find a way to address those questions. I mean, the subject of culture is something we think we need to visit in a different episode entirely, because it's a whole lot of discussion and conversations on culture. So very, very quickly, as we try to wrap up this conversation, what are the effects of conflict in the workplace?
Wow, it's I started with it can be emotionally damaging for people. Emotionally damaging. Let's start with that, because people's feelings matter, isn't it? Their feelings matter, and you cannot deny people of the right to feel the way they are feeling. Especially in this part of our world where we encourage people to suppress their feelings. You're not allowed to show feelings at work. It's unprofessional for you to show feelings at work. Whilst I agree that you must be professional in the way you show your feelings, but we need to help people to recognize, to acknowledge the way they feel. So they say there's this popular word that says people will forget what you say. They'll forget what you do, but they will not forget how you made them feel. So it's very important. I don't know whether it happened to you, somebody you have not seen before. The last memory of that person just jumps at you. Yeah. So to resolve conflict, to help people, we need to create a workplace environment whereby people's feelings are respected. People's feelings, then we give an opportunity for people to communicate where there is dissension. People are not afraid to share their opinion. Then we need to create an effective feedback system.
You're talking about how to basically manage conflict.
Yes, okay. Manage conflict. Earlier I said that the organization must develop a mechanism, a conflict resolution mechanism. Yeah. And one of the opportunity of developing, or one of the channels, is to allow people to provide feedback, a honest feedback. I know people don't like feedback. And like you said, that's another subject of discussion on its own. People don't like feedback because feedback is painful, it's hurting, but we need to, for us to improve, one of the basic ways of improving yourself personally is getting the honest feedback. Yeah. But the organization that is impervious to getting another person's opinion will never get the best of the employees. So the leadership of the organization should ensure that the atmosphere is honest enough for people to provide feedback, and not that they will be penalized victimized. People have given honest feedback in times past, and they saw the reaction of the leadership. They just, I won't say anything anymore. I'll just keep quiet. I'll keep this to myself. Or people have said their honest perspective with the idea of wanting to help the organization, with the idea of wanting to improve the organization, but you slammed them. You slammed them for it. They will never tell you anything. They'll just tell you to do whatever you want to do. They'll just tell you to do whatever you want. And once people begin to have that sense of being victimized, that's another effect. That's, that sense of victimization. It will not help in resolving conflict. So I always tell people, don't make yourself a victim of anything. Take responsibility. Jack off. Don't start blame gaming. Don't start putting, because this person did this, that's what. You must be responsible for your own actions. You must be responsible for your own reaction. I cannot control what somebody says to me, but I can control how I respond. Yeah. I might not even be able to control how I feel about it, but I can control myself. I can use somebody who is mature enough, I can trust. I can use the person as a sounding board to help me evaluate the issue and tell me honestly how I am wrong. And I also need to take responsibility for my own action, because that's what happens with people when they are trying to resolve a conflict. They don't take responsibility for their own action. They just believe the whole responsibility is on the other person. They demonize the other person, and they are not ready to accept their own fault. You must be ready to accept your own fault. That's why I said you cannot afford to play the victim in this instance.
All right, I think at this juncture we need to call it a wrap. It's been great speaking with you.
Yes,
guys, you can always subscribe to this channel for more episodes of The Leadership Factory. Please do well to drop your comments in the comment section, and of course, you can always ask questions and talk about topics you would like us to discuss on this show. Until next time, we'll have a great day.